So, without further ado, Dr. Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Well, good Wednesday afternoon to all of you. How is this week going so far? Good? More or less? We're halfway to Friday? It's going great. That's right. We're going to talk a little bit about power poses, but let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So I am new to the Toledo area. I moved here in February. And the past few years, I lived the cold half, think about it now, the cold half of the Minnesota winter in tropical Thailand. And then I would come back to Minnesota June through December or so, and I taught and did some work at the University of Minnesota there. So when I was in Asia, I taught MBA courses, I did some consulting and some research, and prior to that, I did some strategy work for Best Buy. So we all know Best Buy, the company, is the world's largest consumer electronics company. What do you think that my day consisted of when I worked at Best Buy? What do you think of when you think about Best Buy? Or what would you imagine someone doing working at a company like Best Buy?
Electronics.
Okay, electronics. I still have my BlackBerry. What else? Advertising. What else? Two more. Or just think any large company. Yes. Answering questions, helping people. Absolutely did some of that. Internal customers more so than you would not want me in a blue shirt on the sales floor, because we would both be trying to find the answer to that. What else? Checking out the competition. Yeah, we did some of that as well. So I did strategy work, and specifically around the female customer experience. So we wanted to create a space where women love to shop and women love to work. So I would imagine that if you asked your moms whether they would rather spend an hour at Target or an hour at Best Buy, they'd probably opt for Target, right? And so we wanted to create a space, we worked to create a space where women would want to shop and work in the stores primarily. And so we did a lot of leadership development because we knew that in many of our stores, that may have been some of our employees' very first jobs. And you can be a leader regardless of what your title is at any given point. And there are certain attributes that we all need to hone in on and to develop. And so we're going to talk a little bit about strengths today. And what comes to your mind when I say strengths? What did I hear? Be bold. I heard something over here. Strengths, what comes to your mind? Yes. Intelligence? Great. Things you excel in? Great. How many of you are taking psychology? Okay, what do you study in psychology? Brain and mind? And what else? Behavior? Do you spend a lot of time studying what works really well for people and how their brains work, or do you spend more time studying dysfunction and what's broken? You know, if we were to do a library search of all of the academic articles that have been written in psychology, what we would find is that the vast majority of them study dysfunction. You know, and then there's this assumption that if we understand what's broken and we flip it on its head, then we'll get what's right. And positive psychologists, which is where the strengths-based philosophy or work is based, believe that no, we can study what's broken, what's wrong, and try to find solutions to that. But what if we spent an equal amount of time looking at what works? What's right with people? What do they excel at? What differentiates them from other people? And how might they be able to do more of that in their daily lives? And so we're going to talk a little bit about strengths. And I have a couple of exercises that you'll be able to do over the next week or so. So one of the projects that I worked on when I was at Best Buy is that we developed a sabbatical program for our employees, which meant that people that were doing finance and logistics and marketing and HR, right, and they were doing their day jobs, but in some ways they felt as though they were just going to work to try to get more people to buy the latest technology, which is how the company makes its money. And then on the flip side, we wanted people to really be engaged in what they were able to do at work. And so we developed a series of partnerships, one of them being with an organization called the Grameen Foundation. And what they do is give really small loans, so it's called microfinance work. They give really small loans to the poorest of the poor around the world, primarily mothers, so that they can start small businesses and improve the lives of their families. And so this man in the center here, his name is Dr. Muhammad Yunus, and he was an economics professor in the 1970s based in Tennessee. And his birth country of Bangladesh was going through so many changes, and he thought, I need to be part of that. And what he saw was that A, it was probably one of the world's least developed countries in terms of resources. There were millions of people that lived on less than $2 a day, and that there were these loan sharks that were giving loans, but the families would never be able to pay off. So he said, well, what would happen if I were to give them small loans of $25 so that they can start a company or they can start a little fruit stand, and then they can pay off that loan, and then their kids can go to school, et cetera, et cetera. So these groups of mothers would come together. They would receive their loans in groups of 10. So each of the entrepreneurs had her own idea, but they had to wait until the previous borrower paid off her loan before she could get her loan. Just knowing that bit of information, what do you think that the repayment rate is amongst that kind of banking model? So we had a group of 10 borrowers. What percentage of those 10 do you think repay their loans? 3 guesses, and then I'll tell you the answer. First guess. We're going to go over this section. Okay, we need a guess from this area. Come on. 7%. Okay, we need a guess from the center section. Okay. 64. It's like, the price is right. And then over in this section. 85. We're going in the right direction. In fact, it's 99.8%. Should have said 100, would have been. Yeah, so why do you think that the repayment rate is so high? I mean, do they necessarily have lots of monetary collateral to be able to demonstrate that they have a backup in case they don't pay off their loans? What do they have if they don't have a lot of money? If they have barely enough money to eat? What do they have? We have to go backwards this time. What do they have? Just a guess. They don't have money. What do they have? Ideas. Okay. Guess in this section. They don't have money. What do they have? Relationships, right? So they know that other people are dependent upon them to pay off their loans before they can get her loans. It builds this circle of accountability. And relationships in the sense of, if my child was sick or if I was sick, there were 9 other people there to make sure that I had what I needed in order to, support my business. And so Dr. Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006, and he brought some of these borrowers with him. And I like this quote. He says, "My greatest challenge has been to change the mindset of people. We see things the way that our minds have instructed our eyes to see." She won that, psychology students. We see things the way that our minds have instructed our eyes to see. Right? So normally when we see something, those of us that have visual sight, we can see, I can see that your colors are black and gold. My high school colors, we were home of the Panthers, but we were also black and gold, right? So I can see that, but my mind is telling my eyes what actually to see. So I think that this concept of mindset is very important. This is an iconic photo of a leader, right? picture, what do you hear in the back of your mind? I have a dream, right? And what if Dr. King, instead of saying, I have a dream, what if he just said, I have a dream? Or kind of have this dream, right? Everything is about presence and delivery. And what I shared with an earlier group, something that I learned just this year, was that he had no intention. So first of all, he wrote the speech the night before. He was finishing it up the night before the March on Washington 50 years ago. And secondly, if you were to go back and watch it, he's reading the vast majority of his speech. And he's relying a lot on his notes. It's okay to have notes, but he's relying on his notes. And then there was this great singer by the name of Mahalia Jackson. And she and Dr. King, they would go on these speaking tours across the country. And she could tell that he wasn't really in his zone, right? She knew him. And so she said, tell them about the dreamer. Because she'd heard him deliver that segment of the speech before. And that's when he pushed his notes aside and really spoke from his course, spoke from what he knew. So there's a leadership lesson in that as well. Once you've honed in that which you are meant to do, step into it with both feet and step into it firmly. So I'm going to encourage you to, over the next week or so, keep a journal. How many of you journal? I saw some composition books. I saw lots of composition books when you were coming in, right? So maybe you can use your composition books. Take a page, don't necessarily tear it out, but just fold it in half. And then on one half of the page at the very top, write love. So what are the things that you do over the course of the next week, very specific types of things that you do that just energize you when you're doing them. You lose track of time, you can do them for...
The next time I saw everything, they just come up with the pictures, but they don't say anything that you can do that so that you can generate a gist or you can find water. You figured that out? Yeah, I think I know. It's on this book. If I can try, maybe I can make it and so that I can have electricity. The time I was set to build it, I was 14 years. Take me about 2 months to build it. The moment that I'll make something to generate electricity, what makes people to start realizing that this thing is useful when they are power radio. Was it music that was on radio? It was a local Malawian reggae music. And most of the people, they didn't know what I'm doing. They thought that maybe I'm going mad and maybe I'm crazy. And I didn't see much support on the first time, but after I've built a little swing, some people start realize that, maybe this is a useful thing, maybe we should help him. Yeah.
sake of time, what does William's story have to do with anything we've been talking about so far? What does his story have to do about anything we've talked about so far? If anything. Yes? He had a dream? And he captured it? He recognized his strengths? He achieved his dream? And I should say, he's now, I thought he was a junior, but now that the school year has started, he's a senior at Dartmouth College. So I first read about him in 2008 in The Economist. And at the end of, so I found this particular video. At the end, it said that he's attending the African Leadership Academy. I tracked down the founder of the African Leadership Academy. I was still at Best Buy, and we were doing some social entrepreneurship work. And it just so happened that the founder had studied in Minnesota, where I was based at the time we connected. But that was the first year, and so William had the opportunity to study at the African Leadership Academy, where they recruit students like him, or young people like him from all 52 African countries, to study there for a few years so that they can really kind of be world-class students and then go off to world-class institutions. He's written a book, he started his own company. I mean, he's certainly actualized his dream. What else? I don't know. That I don't know. I know that he's presented at MIT, and then it's probably something to do with electrical engineering or mechanical engineering or something that I have absolutely no expertise in. But he's really started to live out as an entrepreneur, which is fascinating. Anything else? How many of us have built a windmill based on scraps we found in our neighborhood? I mean, that's pretty wild, right? And imagine that he did this in a community that had no access to electricity. So it would have been crazy if we would have just seen a picture book, but we already had the concept of what a windmill could do. But I'm just inspired every time that I see his story. So that's a little bit about William. And so I just encourage you to leverage your strengths. You know, what will your legacy be? How are you going to change the world, or at least the world around you? And it all begins with this notion of self-awareness. So take, a little bit of time, do those activities that, I encouraged you, or that I introduced you to earlier. And I would be curious to know kind of what you learn about yourselves, okay? Are there any questions? No questions? Are you raising your hand or stretching your rubber band? You should always have a question or two in your back pocket. Who has a question? Okay. That's a great question. So I had always been in between academia, or the university world, public service. I'd done some work with the UN, and industry. And because I was doing such out-of-the-box work at Best Buy, it was at the beginning of the recession. Everyone had been offered a buyout, except for the CEO and his 4 direct reports. And I thought, this could be a nice opportunity to step out and do something different. And so that's when I stepped out and began teaching in Thailand. Great question. Business. So for people that had already gone to college or their undergraduate programs, they wanted to get their master's in business.
All right, I'm curious, what prompted you to want to start a leadership academy at
I have such a strong belief that we all are leaders. And when I was at the University of Minnesota, I developed a leadership program between high school students, university students, and executives in local companies. And I saw that it was an opportunity for us to do something with our students within the Joseph Scott Honors College. Hey, I tweet. How many of you tweet? Follow me. My handle, and I'm kind of new at this, but my handle is at @HeyDeanRansom. So if you have questions even after today, send me a little note and I'll answer you.
Let's talk about the reflection for a minute, because this I think will be a pretty unique reflection. So Dr. Ransom has asked you to figure out what are you good at. and then to use those strengths. That's the bulk of her message. Think about William's story. What are the odds? What are the odds of someone dropping out of school in Africa, a short time later being a junior at Dartmouth College in the United States of America, one of the more elite institutions in the United States? And they're off the charts minuscule, right? How did he get there? He played on his strengths. He played on his strengths and he used what he had available to him at that time in a tiny, tiny village in Africa. So the point of her speech is that by playing on your strengths, literally anything is possible. So step one for you guys, we got to figure out what are your strengths. Juniors and seniors, we talked about this quite a bit, starting with your junior retreat and the Myers-Briggs assessment that we did, right? And seniors, you guys are using those strengths currently to lead our programs. So we're on that road. Freshmen, sophomores, this is a little bit new for you guys, so we need to get started. Juniors and seniors, it's still always good to get other people's perspective. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to email to you guys a brief survey using Google Docs, okay? Your job is to forward that to a minimum of 3 people who know you and care enough about you to respond to that survey. So what are Jordan's strengths? I'll ask a few very simple questions. Send it to a teacher, an advisor, a coach, a parent, sibling, someone who knows you well enough and has seen you at your best, seen you at your worst, so they can respond. Okay? It should be real easy for them. I'll get all those responses and come to one spreadsheet. I will get the results to you. Okay? I'll have it delivered to you. We'll print them off, and I'll have them delivered to you guys. You then will be able to see, here's what some people say are my strengths. From there, then, you can take Dr. Ransom's advice and put together a strength profile, and then reflect on how can you possibly live in that strength today, this week, this month, this year. Okay? So I will very quickly send to you guys a survey. Your job is to right away send it out to a minimum of 3 people. Okay? And then from there, I'll get your responses and I'll tell you what to do. Make sense? Any questions? Anything? Okay, more questions for Dr. Ransom. Anybody else?
Yes. Okay, so the question is, if you go to UT but you're not in honors, can you be in a leadership program?